channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country and indeed around the world. We've plenty coming up this afternoon. They think it's all over. Well, it's not, according to my guests today. Top voices from the Truss and Sunak camps. Plus, a good cause with great news in their efforts to help those who need it most. Plus, 2 global hotspots, Ukraine and now Taiwan. All of that to come and lots more. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. Coming up to 1 minute past midday, here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 12-year-old Archie Battersby, who's been in a coma since April, is due to have his life support withdrawn today. It's after the European Court of Human Rights said it would not intervene following a High Court ruling that he can't be moved to a hospice. Archie's parents are said to be devastated after exhausting all legal avenues to extend his care. Doctors treating Archie declared that he was brainstem dead, but his family wanted treatment to continue in the hope that he would recover. Rishi Sunak has told GB News he believes political correctness is getting in the way of Britain tackling grooming gangs. In an exclusive interview, the former Chancellor pledged to create a new task force to tackle the issue and a new life sentence for those found guilty of the offence.
I have 2 young girls who are 9 and 11, and I think for too long we just haven't focused on this issue, Philip. And it's a horrific crime that is affecting actually not just girls in a few places. It's far more pervasive across the country than actually we all realise. And we all know the reason that people don't focus on it. It's because of political correctness, and they're scared of calling out the fact that there's a particular group of people who are perpetuating these crimes, and I think that's wrong.
Liz Truss says she would help people with the cost of living crisis by lowering taxes and not by giving handouts. Speaking to the Financial Times, the Foreign Secretary said she would look at what more can be done to help with rising fuel bills, but would do things in a conservative way if she becomes the next Prime Minister. On Thursday, the Bank of England warned the economy now faces the longest recession since the financial crisis. Conservative MP Jake Berry told GB News he's backing Liz.
I guess it would be part of how, she's approaching this entire leadership election, which is to say that, the government is taking too much money away from us in tax. The best way of helping people deal with the cost of living crisis, whether it's fuel or anything else, is to enable people to keep more money in their pocket. But we are a Conservative government, and that is why, by being Conservatives, she is best placed to take on Keir Starmer and to unite our party after this election.
The Transport Secretary plans to treat killer cyclists the same as motorists by introducing a death by dangerous cycling law. Announcing the plans in the Mail Plus, Grant Shapps said it will close a legal loophole which currently means a cyclist who kills a pedestrian can only be jailed for 2 years. Mr Shapps also criticised what he describes as a selfish minority who believe they are immune to red lights. The NHS's 111 service has warned of delays due to a computer system outage caused by a cyber attack. It's affecting the system used to refer patients for care, including the dispatching of ambulances and emergency prescriptions. There's indications that the issue may not be fully resolved until next week. GB News can reveal that over 1,460 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. 288 were taken to Dover on Friday after being pulled off of 5 inflatables. One migrant was found paddling on a kayak. Our Kent-based producer says UK authorities are currently responding to several other small boat sightings in the Channel, including one off of Dungeness. American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay over £37 million in damages to the parents of a 6-year-old boy killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. Mr. Jones had falsely claimed that the shooting, which happened over a decade ago, was a hoax. 20 children and 6 staff members were killed in that attack. He will also pay £3.3 million in compensatory damages already awarded. The Ministry of Defence say Russia's war in Ukraine is about to enter a new phase, with the majority of fighting shifting to a 217-mile front stretching from Zaporizhia to Kherson. Russian forces appear to be amassing in the south in preparation for a possible assault or anticipating a counteroffensive. Convoys of tanks have been seen moving away from the Donbas region, towing artillery and other weapons. Meanwhile, Ukraine's forces are focusing their targeting on bridges, ammunition depots and rail links with growing frequency. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. In the Tory leadership contest, former opponents have come out in support of either of the 2 remaining candidates. The Times today, however, reports that Truss supporters are now contacting Sunak supporters saying, come on board if you want a job in the next government. And the Mail says it's all over, bar the shouting. So we'll be asking senior MPs in both camps what they make of that. The tax and cost of living debate continues to rage, and the Bank of England says whoever wins faces the prospect of a long, hard recession. China further flexes its muscles over Taiwan, and a good friend of mine, Adam Bolton, writes that we are looking at the prospect of a third world war. Well, they said that about Ukraine too, didn't they? And frankly, who knows? And it isn't just about Chinese territorial ambitions, it's also about economics and manufacturing. Taiwan produces 2/3 of the world's microchips. So if you're thinking of a new phone, a computer, or even electric cars, this stuff really does matter. All that said, you might be forgiving for asking why anyone would want to win this crazy contest, but 2 of them still do. So today we're looking at the remaining runners, the domestic and international backdrop to the contest, and how it may play out in the final 4 weeks. We're talking to another local party bigwig, this time from Eastbourne, where the latest hustings played out last night. We also have the authentic voice of Ukraine, an expert on China and Taiwan, a man who's had more opinion formers in the back of his cab, and lots more besides. And as always, we want to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk with any comments that you may have on the stories that we're covering today. We are also on Twitter, as indeed am I, and on Facebook. So let us get started. I'm delighted to say that joining me in the GB News studios right here this afternoon is Aubrey Allegretti, an old chum of mine, political correspondent from the Guardian newspaper. And down the line, another old chum of mine, Sir Bob Neill, Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst, chair of the Justice Select Committee, and himself a Rishi Sunak backer. Let's get some context, first of all, from a fellow journalist, as it were, Aubrey. Have we got to the point where it is Liz Truss's to lose, or did that show of hands at the end of the Sky debate make a few people, like Bob Neill, think it's still all to play for?
Well, it's certainly not over till it's over. And I mean, we have exactly 4 months until the new Prime Minister is going to take office.
4 weeks.
4 weeks. 4 weeks, goodness me.
I don't think anyone could cope with 4 months.
We couldn't manage 4 months. It feels like 4 months. But we haven't seen the shift in the polls that I think Rishi Sunak supporters have been hoping for. That lead that Liz Truss has held for weeks, while we're only seeing a sort of scattergun approach in terms of the polling, and it is very hard to survey Tory members, she is still maintaining that lead. And Rishi Sunak supporters are getting nervous. When I was speaking to them earlier this week, they were saying, we're hearing from Liz Truss's team, come on board, join our team, you want to pick a winner. So the gap is opening up. I think the other problem Rishi Sunak's got is that there are concerns that he's finding it very hard to shake. Concerns about his timing in terms of the resignation being too cynically motivated. He was challenged on that in some of the debates earlier. And I think that is something that no matter what he says, he can't change people's minds about it, no matter how far the contest gets.
Let's bring Bob in on that point, because, Bob, you are still very much in the Rishi camp. Let me just add one thing to that list of concerns that you and your man may have, and that is Rishi being seen to shoot himself in the foot over boasting down there in Kent about shifting aid from deprived urban areas to help in the leafy Tory suburbs. Even people like Jake Berry are furious about that.
OK, well, let's deal with that one head on, Alistair, if you like. Good to see you again, by the way. What actually she was saying there when you unpick that is something which I was concerned about when I was local government minister, something I raised with him when he was local government minister, was actually the way distribution of aid works is that we don't pick up the fact that there are serious pockets of poverty in otherwise supposedly wealthy regions. You all know, Alistair, the level of rural poverty there are in many parts of this country. You know the amount of poverty that there is actually in coastal towns. That was what we were talking about in the context of Kent and Sussex. And simply a broad brush which says everything down south is prosperous, everything up north needs help, isn't the way that it works. I think he was making a very fair point that actually you've got to be much more nuanced about that. And in some cases, it's right to say that money has to go into those deprived areas in those rundown rural communities, very poor connectivity, very poor employment, housing opportunities, or those older seaside resorts where there's some really tough social problems. I've seen them myself.
Bob, while you were saying that, for those who are kind enough to be listening to our conversation on radio rather than television, we were also running some pictures both of Rishi and of Liz coming in for one of the televised debates. In your view, how has your man done in those debates? Because the commentary, totally independent, as you'd expect from the likes of me, say that he went from being really aggressive to being slightly more ameliorating, back to aggressive again in Eastbourne. How's he done?
I think he's done really well, Alistair. And actually, thank God it is 4 weeks and not 4 months. But sometimes when you've got a run of these debates, it's a sign of a good debater to be able to change gear and change tone from time to time, depending on the audience and depending on the topic. But what's come across to my mind consistently is that he's the one that's on top of the brief. He's got the figures. He's got the details. There isn't any flam around what he's saying, and he's being direct with people. And I think that's really coming across to folks. I do think that that people are thinking. He was in my constituency, actually, Alistair, yesterday morning before those debates. 130 people there, really geared up. And the number of folk who were coming over to me who were saying, well, look, before I was undecided, but I'm going to back him now. And some saying, look, I was going to go to vote for Liz, but no. He's got the responsible, the sensible, the properly conservative solutions to this massive economic problem that's coming towards us.
Bob, the next voice you'll hear will be Aubrey Allegretti, my guest here in the studio with me from The Guardian. Aubrey.
Hi, Bob. I'm just wondering to what extent you think that Team Rishi was complacent at the start and relied on Liz Truss to falter, go into those TV debates, mess up, and for Rishi Sunak to just sort of appear, as you say, on top of his brief. Instead, we haven't sort of seen that performance from her. She seems to have hit the ground sort of running, continued her stride. Do you think that there's been a complacency by Rishi Sunak's team?
I think we just had to change gear from what was a parliamentary phase of the campaign, Aubrey, to the general public campaign. What I think is significant, of course, is that when we ended that parliamentary phase, Rishi had by far the largest number of MPs backing him. And that says something because, you know, the people who've worked with these people, and we worked with all of the candidates, are perhaps as well placed as anyone to know which one is actually going to win the election for us. Because all the policy debates are fascinating, but they're academic, unless one of them is actually going to take the country with them. who's the one that's plausible and actually comes across sensibly, calmly, competently to the electorate, because I think that's what they work. So there will be changes of gear, as we were saying before, Aubrey, and changes of tone in the campaign. But I think we're revving up well now, and the support that we're getting and the feedback that we're all picking up is really, really strong.
Yeah. Let me bring in another thing that we haven't touched upon yet, but I know all three of us have been thinking a great deal about, and that's the report from the Bank of England in the last 48 hours. And I jokingly said in my introduction, given what the governor of the Bank of England said, who'd really want to win this contest anyway? But the thing that strikes me, Bob, most about that is that whilst contests always yield glitches, the differences on the Bank of England and interest rates seems to be about grasp and competence and Tory vision. And the fact that Rishi is a former Chancellor, knows how the bank works, knows the mandate about inflation intimately, is not winning that argument, whereas the outsider, a former junior minister in the Treasury, Liz Truss, is.
Well, that's something I think that my friends in the Conservative Party need to get a long think about, frankly, because now's not the time for experimentation. Now's not the time for taking risks. I thought it was a very good piece on one of the other rival channels this morning about the risk of us doing a repeat of the Barber boom, which you and I can remember, Alex, of the 70s, when Tony Barber, just like Liz is suggesting now, said, let's put more demand into the economy, let's reduce taxes, not funded out of savings. It'll boost growth. It's exactly what Liz is saying. It ended up disastrously. And we had major inflation, gave us a Labour government, and then all the problems that Margaret had to sort out thereafter. Contrast, Nigel Lawson, Margaret's longest-serving Chancellor, arguably someone will think the best Chancellor this country's had, perhaps in the last half of the 20th century, coming out for Rishi saying, this is sound Conservative economics. We all want to reduce tax. I want to reduce tax as much as anyone, but you can only do it if you've got inflation under control, if you've got sound money. And it's just reminding my fellow Conservatives that actually we're a sound money party above everything. Because if you don't have sound money, that corrodes inflation. Inflation corrodes, it corrodes savings, it corrodes pensions. It actually divides society as well. And I make no apology for us being upfront with our members and the electorate with that. I think the electorate get it. And I think we have to say to our colleagues in the party, great, let's have vision for the future. But the vision's got to be based upon a firm, sound basis to start with.
And to be crystal clear, this is from Bob Neal's point of view, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that you're speaking on behalf of Rishi. You may be, for all I know, but that's a different way of putting the question. To be crystal clear, you not only think that Liz has got this fundamentally wrong on what she would do with that emergency budget within days of taking over, you think it runs the same risk that Tony Barber risked on behalf of Ted Heath back in the 70s of rampant inflation, collapse, and then lo and behold, hey, they lost the next election.
I think it runs exactly that risk, Alistair, and having lived through it as a young councillor and activist in those days, I've seen what it does. So that's why I think it's really important. That's why, say, Nigel Lawson says what he says, why Michael Howard has taken the same view, why Peter Lilly, again, one of Margaret's strongest associates, takes the same view, why William Hague takes the same view. All the people who've lived through it and seen it as practical politicians know that this isn't a fanciful risk. This is a real one.
I find that absolutely extraordinary because he and I are of a similar generation. You're obviously from a younger, newer generation. And he's right. Historically, that's exactly what happened with Heath and Barber. And he's right, historically, that's exactly what happened with Thatcher, Geoffrey Howe, and then Nigel Lawson. Liz is turning that history on its head and still winning.
Yes, because she's not just trying to win people's minds, but their hearts as well. And so many Conservative members and some MPs as well feel that they have been kind of starved under Boris.
But is it also, sorry to interrupt, but is it also, as I think Bob is implying, that such is the desperation out there amongst ordinary folk wrestling with the cost of living crisis that they are prepared to take a huge risk? They don't remember Tony Barber and rampant inflation. They just want immediate cuts in tax. They want an immediate reversal of the national insurance tax hike because they are desperate.
Yeah, quite possibly. And levelling up the sort of landmark pledge that was meant to help these very deprived, left behind communities is such an elongated process that people are looking at 2019, they see that COVID got in the middle of it, but they say those kind of big system changes we were promised haven't happened fast enough for us. And tax cuts is one of those very insatiable ways of saying to people, you will get that money back in your pocket, so to speak, very, very quickly. That's why it's so...
Even if that money is worth 15% less in a year's time.
Exactly.
Bob, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to put something to you and then I'll take a final take from Aubrey here in the studio. And this is what is very much at the forefront of my mind, and that is that your man has two key problems. Aubrey's mentioned one of them, so I'll come to that second. The first one is that if he's got all the brilliant ideas now as a Prime Minister in waiting, why didn't he do it when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer and actually had the keys to the red box and the key to number 11? And the second is Aubrey's point about the party in the country, whether it's Bromley, Chislehurst or Eastbourne last night, will never forgive him for being the man who wielded the knife that toppled Johnson. 2 points there. Why didn't he do it when he was in office? And will he ever be forgiven for knifing Johnson?
Well, if you look, when we started off in office prior to the COVID dislocation, which threw everything out of the window, we were already making steps. We'd taken steps to reduce the levels of tax. In particular, Rishi had introduced the super deduction, as it's called, on corporation tax, which the IMF and the CBI have said was actually world-changing, one of the best things to keep investment in the country. So we were already on track to start that. But of course, the COVID costs, which had to be picked up at the time, nobody argued with that. But what we're saying is you need to start paying that down now. That obviously delayed things, but he has a track record on reform there. Second point, I'll be blunt, I think there's a bit of mythology building up around the stab in the back as far as Boris is concerned. One of my colleagues, Andrew Morrison, did a piece in The Guardian. And Andrew is a regular naval officer. I've known him for years, served Queen and country, was a lifelong Brexiteer, so no side there. Andrew was saying he was so concerned about the situation with Boris that he went to see Rishi and was urging him to try and make a move. And Rishi refused to do so. Because I don't believe this idea that Rishi was a conspiracy theorist. I more than once dropped hints to Rishi when I worked him, not a peep. He never took the bite. So I'm afraid that suggestion, at the same time, as I'll be blunt, I was getting plenty of invitations, in other words, for Fizz with Liz at exactly that time. Rishi was actually standing by the Prime Minister. I can't speak for others, but I think it's just been convenient to say because Rishi and Sajid Javid, who actually, of course, resigned first, were the two most high-profile people to go first. Let's shift the blame onto them. I don't think that does a great service to anybody, actually. But, but let's just take it on the chin and set the facts out as we know they are.
Bob, great to talk to you, as always. Thank you very much indeed. Final brief thought to you. The key point that he's making there is that you rewrite history to suit your circumstances, and this is a fight to the death.
Well, absolutely. And I think the piece that he mentioned, Andrew Morrison, came to me and said, I'm really concerned about the way that this is being portrayed, and I want to show that I was being approached from other people, and actually Rishi was one of the people that was behaving most properly. Now, I think part of the problem the Rishi Sunak team have had, they were too naive in terms of thinking that they could play all this quite cuddly, softly, not engage in too much briefing against other camps. Liz Truss's team were incredibly brutal in those earlier stages during the parliamentary contest, and that's continued and ramped up against Rishi Sunak. And when you speak to Team Rishi supporters, you sort of ask them if they're going to realise, and they say, we think we're getting there, we think we're understanding what they've done.
And you're still absolutely convinced that initial brutality and continuing grasp will yield the big prize for mistrust?
Yeah, I believe so, because they've been able to steal a march, be able to rewrite history, as you put it.
Aubrey, great to talk to you. You're coming back at 1 o'clock when we would have had other conversations that I'll ask you to reflect upon, but also broaden it out a bit to things like education and transport too. But for the time being, Aubrey Allegretti from The Guardian, thank you very much indeed. And Bob Deal, I just heard my producer in my ear saying thank you to him, so he may have unplugged, but if he's still listening, Bob, thank you. You're always welcome. Now, listening to that conversation, and joining me live now is David Lorry. David is director of the National Private Hire Taxi Association, representing that splendid group of men and women who hear day in, day out the authentic voice of Britain. And there he is. So what's the buzz that you're picking up, both yourself, but more importantly from your members?
Well, I mean, our members are clearly concerned about the cost of living crisis. They're concerned about the effects of COVID and the lack of support that they've been given. They're concerned about things that are coming into play for them, including levelling up. I mean, as far as whoever is the leader of Parliament coming forward is concerned, we're only interested in what's going to happen to us, to our service, to the service that you've just wondrously introduced yourself, that a lot of the community rely on, specifically the elderly and those that are less able to afford more luxury services as it used to be.
The other thing that has always struck me, and I'm a former industrial and economics correspondent, is that your industry is what us economists call a leading indicator. If your trade's down, then the economy is in trouble. When the economy picks up again, then your trade does well. And by definition, you're at the cutting edge of the cost of living crisis because diesel's going up and the rest of it. Do either candidate, and I don't want to tempt you into territory that you have to be careful about as a leader of a group that has both Tory, Labour and all sorts of folk within it, but are either of them talking the kind of language that you personally and your members want to hear about the economy and the cost of living crisis?
Well, there's another aspect that affects the taxi trade as well. While people are frustrated and irate and they're concerned about the cost of living crisis, we've also got to look at the sheer drop in number of drivers due to the lack of government support. Now, that means that not only have the prices gone up for fuel and for home commodities and for food and just to keep feeding the family, but the price of taxis have gone up as well, and there's more of a waiting time for those taxis to arrive, which means that the members of the public are even more irate. Now, the snapshot of that is drivers are being attacked. Now, what we want to see is more protection, less negative publicity towards our trade, because what we tend to find is within government and within local authority, all we ever hear is we need to protect the public against us. Well, hang on a minute. We're the ones that are working till silly hours every morning, getting people home safely. That's our job. We get you home safely. So to give that impression out there that the public need protecting against us is dangerous. And we need to be looking more at what the politicians are going to do to help support and recognise the taxi and private hire industry.
The final point, and it kind of flows directly from that, and I do take your point about the need for you men and women to be looked after. Anyone in that kind of public-facing industry deserves that, at least, minimum. The other thing is the majority, and I talk to all taxi drivers who take me around, the vast majority of you are self-employed. You are mini businesses. You're running your own little business within an industry. This is a Tory leadership campaign for the prime ministerialship of the country. Hardly a dicky bird has been mentioned about self-employment, wealth creation, getting out there and doing your own thing.
Well, that's right. And we saw that through COVID as well. The unemployed people got £20 bonus. Even cyclists got £50 free to upgrade their cycles. The employed people only took a 20% pay cut through COVID. The larger industries, such as the bus network, were given £5.5 billion. And the taxi and private hire industry, we got nothing. Not only did we get nothing to support us through COVID, we're being hit with new requirements and new clean air zones and new demands to buy £68,000 vehicles. And it is making the taxi and private hire industry unaffordable. It's turning it into a non-viable business. And that is dangerous because that will have a massive impact on public safety. When you've got young girls having to walk home early in the morning or late at night on their own in the dark, how is that promoting and endorsing public safety? We need protecting. We need help. Whoever takes over, look at the self-employed, not just taxi and private hire, but certainly taxi and private hire. We are vulnerable out there. We are at risk. And if people aren't careful, if the governments aren't careful, you're going to lose the industry.
David, a real pleasure talking to you. Davy Laurie there from the National Private Taxi Hire Association. Very thoughtful on health, safety, getting the job done and how a real economy can function. Glad to have met him, and I hope he comes back and joins us again for further conversation. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, old friends and now new friends, and we've lots more coming up on today's programme. The family of Archie Battersby say that they have done all that they can. All legal routes have been exhausted, and the young boy's life support system has been withdrawn. We'll be discussing that devastating story next. But first, let's take a break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's 12:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. 12-year-old Archie Battersby, who's been in a coma since April, is due to have his life support withdrawn today. Archie's parents are said to be devastated after exhausting all legal avenues to extend his care, including the European Court of Human Rights. Doctors treating Archie declared that he was brainstem dead, but his family wanted treatment to continue in the hope that he would recover. Rishi Sunak has told GB News he believes political correctness is getting in the way of Britain tackling grooming gangs. In an exclusive interview, the former Chancellor pledged to create a new task force to tackle the issue and a new life sentence for those found guilty of the offence. Liz Truss says she would help people with the cost of living crisis by lowering taxes and not by giving handouts. Speaking to the Financial Times, the Foreign Secretary said she would look at what more can be done to help with rising fuel bills, but would do things in a conservative way if she becomes the next Prime Minister. GB News can reveal that over 1,460 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. 288 were taken to Dover on Friday after being pulled off 5 inflatables. One migrant was found paddling on a kayak. GB News understands UK authorities are currently responding to several other small boat sightings in the Channel, including one off Dungeness. 9 rail companies are due to strike on August 13th, including the London Overground, Avanti West Coast and LNER. The strike is expected to significantly impact fans journeying to Premier League games taking place across the country. The Rail Delivery Group is urging ASLEF's leadership to continue talks to avoid disrupting passengers' plans. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
have a strict rule that if I make a mistake, I admit it as quickly as possible and as publicly as necessary. I said just before that news bulletin that Archie Battersby life support system had been switched off. That is inaccurate. The decision has been made that all of the court possibilities and the legal possibilities have now ended, and it is a matter of time before Archie's life support system is switched off. I apologise profusely for that error. It was entirely my own. The 12-year-old boy has been in a coma since April and will spend his final few hours, perhaps days, but more likely hours, in a hospital. It is reported that the life support system is in fact expected to be withdrawn later on today. Now, his family say that they're devastated, that all of those legal routes have indeed been exhausted. GB News correspondent Ellie Costello is out the hospital for us now. Ellie, all of the legal possibilities.
Well, Archie Battersby's family are understandably said to be devastated this morning. The hospital had permission to withdraw his life support from 10 o'clock this morning, and we don't yet have any news from the hospital on Archie's condition, but we do understand that Archie's family are by his bedside. The hospital had said that they wouldn't delay in withdrawing his treatment, as it wasn't in Archie's best interests. His family had previously wanted to move Archie to a local hospice, as they considered that to be a more dignified ending, but a High Court ruling, a Court of Appeal ruling on Friday determined that that was not to be the case. The judge found that the hospital's plans for Archie's death were dignified and peaceful, and she added that moving Archie to a hospice only carried significant risk to him. The legal avenues were then exhausted after the European Court of Human Rights refused to intervene in the case, and that is when the hospital were told they could withdraw life support. The judge in the High Court said that Archie's family showed unconditional love and dedication to Archie, and they described it as a golden thread that ran through this case. And Archie's mum, Holly Dance, has said, "I have done everything I promised my little boy that I would do."
Ellie Costello there reporting from the hospital. I'm joined now by former neurologist Dr. Mike Barnes. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. And if I may say so, your face says it all. There is nothing positive that can be said about this, save perhaps to reflect upon a remarkable family that have done everything within their powers to try and get the outcome that they wanted. You have no doubt in your own mind, medically, that the hospital were right in the advice and guidance that they were giving the court.
Yes, I've not met Archie, obviously, but I have no doubt that they will have followed a code. There's a code of practice written and well recognised and well in use for a number of years now. I have no doubt that the hospital has followed that code of practice and confirmed that, very sadly, Archie is what is called brainstem dead. And that means there is no prospect at all of natural recovery.
Take me through something else. I support our local hospice down in Hampshire, Naomi House, Jack's Place. Can you take me through medically why it would have been precarious to move this little boy from hospital to a hospice so that his final moments could be in a more intimate surrounding exclusively with his family?
Yes, Archie is clearly in a very fragile state, and his life is totally dependent on artificial means. And transferring someone in that state is precarious. There would be a risk, very sadly, that Archie would die during the transit. That's not certain. From a personal point of view, I think that the hospital and the family, if that was the family's wish, the hospital perhaps should have made every effort to try and accede to that risk. But that is not the case. The High Court has determined it's in best interest to stay where he is and sadly die in the hospital in which he's in at the moment. I understand that.
Final question, and it's really for you to reach back into your own memories of your years in practice. When the moment comes, will that hospital in London be able to, as it were, clear the decks and create as much intimacy as they can exclusively for Archie and his family?
I really hope so. I mean, as everyone knows, in every hospital ward, there are private rooms, there are separate rooms, and I hope and believe that Archie will be moved to a private, quieter area on the ward where his family can sit with him in his final hours. I really hope that's the case, and I'm sure they'll do everything they can to facilitate that.
Mike Barnes, Dr. Mike Barnes, former neurologist, speaking to me there from Newcastle. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Mike, for your sensitivity. As we both said at the beginning, there's no upside to this, save humanity reaching out to humanity. Thanks for sharing in that. Goodness me, such a dreadful time. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more to come this afternoon, including we'll be shifting the agenda and the mood and the tone completely to foreign affairs. China halting cooperation with the United States in several key areas, including climate change, military talks and efforts to combat international crime, not least because the woman in the middle of that picture, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker in Washington, D.C., ignored all advice and guidance and went to visit the folk of Taiwan. China's gone crackers about it and is flexing its muscles. So how worried should we be? I'll be speaking to a very good friend of mine, top defence editor Robert Fox, right after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 1:15. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. The muscle flexing by China over Taiwan grows more troubling by the day, by the hour. Testing and breaching territorial airspace and waters has become a regular occurrence, and the language grows more belligerent by the day as well. As I said just before that break, Nancy Pelosi's visit, against the specific urgings of President Xi, has been heady. So, what's really going on, and how worried should we be? The person that can answer that and also talk about Ukraine is my next guest, Robert Fox, defence editor of the Evening Standard. Come to Ukraine in a moment, but first of all on Taiwan, this was specifically against the urgings of President Xi himself, and they have reacted hugely.
They're making a lot of noise. This is what's generally called a firepower demonstration, and they're trying to provoke the Taiwanese. By that I mean the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. And I don't think that they're aiming to have a hot exchange of fire yet. What the Chinese must be looking at with the Taiwanese is how they are looking at the Chinese forces around them that are provoking them. There's even were rumours that they were going to fire ballistic missiles over the landmass of Taiwan itself. It is really to see what they have got, and that's where there is a synergy connection with Ukraine, because it's the surveillance war, the electronic war, the cyber war that is so interesting. We're not hearing nearly enough about it for very obvious reasons. And it does seem that the combination of Ukraine, NATO, and above all the US have got the Russians somewhere on the back foot. And the Chinese are taking this on board very much.
Sure, OK, but within that answer, intriguing point, you're saying testing what the Taiwanese have got or how far they're prepared to use it. Because I presume in this day and age, China knows exactly what Taiwan's got and where it came from.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, really?
No, and it doesn't know. Yes, Michael Evans, former colleague of the Times, did a wonderful chart. You know, they have ex-submarines, they have 2 submarines or whatever. You can do that up the yin-yang, sorry to use that expression. It doesn't really count. It's the secret stuff. It is what the secret squirrel electronically and in cyberspace, digitally, through the use of satellites, because China has already started threatening, you know, satellite wars over this, because they are very, very worried that were they to launch something, and by the way, Xi has pledged, he has said in his time he wants to recover Taiwan to the Great Republic, and if necessary, will use force. Now, he doesn't want to use force and end up in a Ukraine situation, where it was all supposed to be over within a month.
Or anger the United States of America.
Or anger the United States of America. And this, to pick up the Pelosi thing, couldn't have happened at a worse time for Xi. Xi wanted to be on a glide path up to October or thereabouts, when you have the Congress, the Politburo, where he hopes to be crowned unusually for another 10 years. Which would be unprecedented. This has really gummed up the works. And it's annoyed a lot of other people, which we're not hearing about, who have got really antsy about this, namely Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, because what they're saying, now look here, China, you've been beating up our fishing fleets to a horrible degree, Philippines and so on, going as far as the coast of Ecuador even. No, the Pacific isn't your lake. Even this part, it isn't your lake. They're international waters. Xi is not Putin. He is not going for bust on this, because he, as I said, wants to get control and wants to get control of the party and then move on to
After this answer, I'm going to segue specifically to Ukraine, because I know you've been studying and writing about that recently as well. But my segue is this. It's worth folk listening to our conversation to remember that this, like Ukraine, is unfinished business. Because Taiwan exists, because when Mao took over all those years ago, those who wanted democracy and freedom as opposed to communism shifted offshore, went to Taiwan and have defended it with the support of America over the years. Not unlike Ukraine, what was left of the Soviet Union.
Yes, and Ukraine did have an advantage, a scientific advantage. It also had the nuclear arsenal. The simple reply to Taiwan, which makes it so difficult for Xi, is semiconductors and microchips. Is he really going to go in and have a bloody war and a messy war that turns out to be a bit of a Ukraine? Look what's going on in the super nuclear plant there, and you're going to trash that. The United States, but any potential customer, including the developing world, which is the real game for Russia and China now, Africa, Asia, and so on, they will not forgive them for that.
OK, Ukraine specifically, I read a couple of things over the last couple of days, and I thought, oh, Fox is coming on, thank God for that. I can ask him what's actually happening. Is Russia regrouping, strengthening the south, because they're fearful they're taking a hiding and on the poise to take an even greater hiding, and yet Russia firing serious weaponry from very close to a nuclear power station because they know they can't be hit back. What is actually going on the ground right now?
Take the nuclear station and just take a grain of the president of Ukraine's charge about that. They're using it as a defensive fortress. Alistair, for goodness sake, they were supposed to be moving out of this. They're supposed to be moving to take the whole of Donbass by the end of August. No chance. Russian forces are too stretched. A 250-mile front or thereabouts, all the way from the Donbass, Mykolaiv, where they're also having a very difficult plain. By the way, they're being challenged at sea with the Black Sea and right to Kherson. And Kherson is developing into a much more important battle than the Russians anticipated it being, because this is where shoot and scoot, now you see me, now you don't, I'm going to do this tactic, and then I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to give any indication. This is where the Ukrainians are proving very, very effective. Just to give a very quick rider, I think Putin is beginning to maneuver diplomatically. I think he is looking for, he's a super card player, diplomatically, strategically. He's got to find a way out. He's got to find a way of pausing, of gathering, because, frankly, conventional ground forces are a busted flush. So he's got Erdogan going in. He's got the basketball player as a possible bargaining chip. And so there's a lot moving. And hot August, it isn't the silly season.
Final quick one then. Zelensky, in that circumstance, may just be willing to sit down and talk, having said, I won't talk, I won't talk, I won't negotiate. In that circumstance, for saving lives, he may be.
He may just be, but the one person I haven't mentioned in all this who's coming up is the former German Chancellor, Gerhard Schröder, you know, who lied, died just on the holiday. In fact, he went to see Putin when he was there. Zelensky, as you rightly say, he's got one big problem, apart from not having enough ammunition and arms. He's got good quality. It's people.
Yeah.
You can't bleed your country like this. And if there's a chance... But unfortunately, I think it will be a truce, it will be a ceasefire, and it's like so much that has happened around Russia for the past 25 years, it could all blow up again.
I shall jot that down because, as I told you during the break, we're talking to a Ukrainian MP in the second half of the programme. Robert, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time and for your knowledge. Great to see you again. Thank you. Robert Fox there, the great defence editor of the Evening Standard. Now, you've been getting in touch on our big topics of the day, the main one being the leadership race. So let me share back with some of what you've had to say so far. David says borrowing will lead to higher inflation. Just remember how Thatcher dealt with it. Benjamin says the contest has gone on far too long with, frankly, ridiculous hustings, and not one of them really seems to understand the situation that real people are facing. If they did, they wouldn't let it go on so long, and they would start hitting the ground running, to quote Liz. Mike says, since it's clear that nobody's actually governing the country, that's a common theme from a lot of folk here, we are facing major problems. It's time to speed up the Tory hustings process and get the new Prime Minister and Cabinet in place by September the 1st or earlier. So thank you for those thoughts and all of the others that I didn't have time for at this juncture. I will try and get some more as the programme comes along, but do keep them coming in. And don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News, where you can pick up on all of the interviews that we've done and indeed programmes that we have done in the past. Now, the cost of living crisis is here for the long haul, and it's at the front of everybody's mind as people struggle to afford the basics like fuel and food. We spoke to my next guest back in May as part of our Good Causes slot. Billy McGranagan is the founder of Dad's House, which offers advice and guidance to single-parent dads and families with things like the cost of living crisis, but also about separation. Well, he is back, sitting right next to me, and has some brilliant news. When my team told me, I was absolutely cock-a-hoop. Do share.
We got a wonderful donation of £26,000 that is going to change some dads' lives, and we're going to take dads and the children on summer holidays, you know, and help with gas, electric, and we bought a dad a wash machine yesterday.
For those who are listening to the conversation on radio, so we're looking at very big smiley faces and very big checks. That's your team, and there it is.
That's part of the ultimate Facebook group who organised the donation, and that was organised by Marina Lauswitz and the team there, Fiona and I forget his name, Matt Evans, who's now.
But this is a number of people chipping into that fund, or one big donor.
It was a group of people who came to a conference, and everyone paid £150 each to listen to a man called Steve Hardison, and there was a book written on the work that he does called The Ultimate Coach.
Yeah.
And they asked Dad's House to be They're partners. And I couldn't believe it. The phone call came out the blue and they asked me to speak at the event. I nearly had a heart attack, Alistair. I thought there was going to be 30 people there. There was 500-600 people. You know, I've never done that in my life. I mean, to get me and speak to you on TV, I've got butterflies and everything. It's unbelievable, you know. But what we're doing now is something that we can change things.
Yeah.
You know, now we can hire a arts and crafts teacher for our dads who comes to our Saturday morning.
Let me butt in on that, because, as I said, it is transformational. And if you're one of the big national, international charities, that would be a drop in the ocean. But for a charity of your size, that is transformational. Are you sensing from your clients, if I can call them that things on the cost of living crisis, just leave over here for a moment the fact that they're on their own, there's separation, there are legal arguments, we still do all of that brilliant stuff. But on the actual cost of living crisis, are you picking up any sense that things are beginning to get a bit better, or are you still all in it for the long haul?
Oh, no, this is long haul. And it's actually got worse since October last year, you know, and now we're seeing families who can't afford electricity, especially families on prepayment meters. They're going without gas and electric 3 or 4 days a month because their wages don't get paid on time, or maybe the universal credit doesn't come through, and they run out of gas and electric. Fortunately, we can help. You know, we've got brilliant partnerships. I always say that, Alistair, that we can help someone with £50 or £100 to top up their meter, you know. And
But you see, I think that's intriguing, because if Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss was sitting there, I'd make the same point I'm about to make now. And that is, I'm not sure everybody out there completely understands that what nobody can do is impact on the price of electricity and gas. The only thing that the government and brilliant charities like yours can do is help people pay those bills. Those prices are only going to come down when the market rate comes down, and that's beginning to happen, but slowly.
Yeah, but it's not going to affect our mums and dads who come to our food bank. You know, this is going to be catastrophic in October, November this year. You're going to see families devastated, you know, and it's not just gas and electric. We've got people who are self-employed, you know, who can't pay their workers, you know. They can't put petrol in the car. The building materials have went sky high, you know. So when they're putting that onto the clients can't afford it. So they're now using food banks, you know. So it's not one thing. It's a cascade of different families, and the cost of living crisis is classless, because what we see is we've got breakfast clubs and yoga, and dads come to our groups for different things. And it's food insecurity that really gets people.
Let me ask you this then, because we were talking to the guy from the Cabbies Association earlier on, and he was saying, you know, we want to get out there and work, we want to earn a living, although diesel prices gone up, this, that and the other. And you've got Liz Truss up against Rishi Sunak, basically saying it's all about getting the economy kick-started and going by cutting taxes, reversing the national insurance rate increases. What do you think, as somebody who is observing that challenge through your own eyes, but also the eyes of your clients, what do you think is the way forward? Because we can't live on food banks and handouts forever.
No, well, what's happening now, the people who used to donate to food banks are no longer donating. They can't afford it. So food banks, there's so many closing down, Alistair, you know, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the next Prime Minister is going to do to ease the pain of people like yourself, you know, because it's not just the poorest, it's affecting everybody. And again, with the cascade of people who do well, middle class, who donate to charities like Dad's House, they can't donate anymore.
Yeah.
So it's with the...
Well, I'll tell you what, Billy, because we've run out of time. We've got to hit the top of the hour. When we know forward in September who that person is, you come on again.
Absolutely. And this is for you, by the way.
There we are. Dad's House. He's holding it up. There we are. Google it. Look what they do. They do great stuff, and they are helping good people. Billy, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, and well done on the cheque. Thank you.
Thank you.
Billy McGannigan there, founder of Dad's House, talking about what they're doing and how long they have to keep doing it. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on the programme in the second hour. More on that all-important leadership contest. We've spoken to Rishi supporters, so we'll be talking to a Liz Truss backer in the next hour. Plus, we'll have an update from in Ukraine, and that will be right after this break, so don't go away.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. Hello and welcome back if you've been with us since noon. The time is now 1.5 minutes past 1. I am Alastair Stewart, and we are into the second and final hour of our programme. I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with plenty more still to come, including more on our top discussion, that all-important Tory leadership race to be the next Prime Minister. Earlier, we spoke to a Rishi supporter, and this hour we'll be hearing from the other camp. So do also keep your views coming in, and I'll be reading some of them out at the end of the programme. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news. Here again is Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. Almost exactly 2 minutes past 1. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 12-year-old Archie Battersby, who's been in a coma since April, is due to have his life support withdrawn today. It's after the European Court of Human Rights said it would not intervene following a High Court ruling that he can't be moved to a hospice. Archie's parents are said to be devastated after exhausting all legal avenues to extend his care. Doctors treating Archie declared that he was brainstem dead, but his family wanted treatment to continue in the hope that he might recover. Rishi Sunak has told GB News he believes political correctness is getting in the way of Britain tackling grooming gangs. In an exclusive interview, the former Chancellor pledged to create a new task force to tackle the issue and a new life sentence for those found guilty of the offence.
I have two young girls who are 9 and 11, and I think for too long we just haven't focused on this issue, Philip. And it's a horrific crime that is affecting actually not just girls in a few places. It's far more pervasive across the country than actually we all realise. And we all know the reason that people don't focus on it. It's because of political correctness, and they're scared of calling out the fact that there's a particular group of people who are perpetuating these crimes, and I think that's wrong.
Well, his leadership contender, Liz Truss, says she would help people with the cost of living crisis by lowering taxes and not by giving handouts. Speaking to the Financial Times, the Foreign Secretary said she would look at what more can be done to help with rising fuel bills, but would do things in a conservative way if she becomes the next PM. Ms Truss says she would look at lowering green energy levies.
I know people are struggling with fuel bills, with food bills at this very difficult time. And that is why I would have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to make sure everybody is saving money on those fuel bills. And what I'll also do is make sure we do have the energy supplies in our country to bring those bills down over time. That is the approach I will take, but I will always be thinking of those who are struggling. I know it's very difficult times and I will do all I can to help them.
The Transport Secretary plans to treat killer cyclists the same as motorists by introducing a death by dangerous cycling law. Announcing the plans in the Mail Plus, Grant Shapps said it will close a legal loophole, which currently means a cyclist who kills a pedestrian can only be jailed for 2 years. Mr Shapps also criticised what he describes as a selfish minority who believe they are immune to red lights. The NHS's 111 service has warned of delays due to a computer system outage caused by a cyber attack. It's affecting the system used to refer patients for care, including the dispatching of ambulances and emergency prescriptions. There's indications that the issue may not be fully resolved until next week. GB News can reveal that over 1,460 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. 288 were taken to Dover on Friday after being pulled off of 5 inflatables. One migrant was found paddling on a kayak. Our Kent-based producer says UK authorities are currently responding to several other small boat sightings in the Channel, including one off Dungeness. American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay over £37 million in damages to the parents of a 6-year-old boy killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. Mr. Jones had falsely claimed the shooting, which happened over a decade ago, was a hoax. 20 children and 6 staff members were killed in that attack. He will also pay over £3 million in compensatory damages already awarded. Fighting along the Gaza Strip has continued into a second day as an Israeli airstrike destroyed 3 houses. One of the owners claims he was given advanced warning by the Israeli army to evacuate his home. Palestinian militants have reportedly fired at least 160 rockets at Israel in response to yesterday's surprise operation against Islamic Jihad militants. The strike killed 12 Palestinians, including a senior commander and 1 child. The Ministry of Defence say Russia's war in Ukraine is about to enter a new phase, with the majority of fighting shifting to a 217-mile front stretching from Zaporizhia to Kherson. Russian forces appear to be amassing in the south in preparation for a possible assault or anticipating a counter-offensive. Convoys of tanks have been seen moving away from the Donbass region, towing artillery and other weapons. Meanwhile, Ukraine's forces are focusing their targeting on bridges, ammunition depots and rail links with growing frequency. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Let's get back now to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. 7.5 minutes past 1. The leadership race is well and truly underway, and we've spoken about it quite a bit already on the programme. Today is no different, with only 4 weeks left to go, and even more hustings like the one in Eastbourne last night. Former candidates are coming out in support of either camp, and the momentum, however, appears to be with Liz Truss. Times are reporting that Truss backers are contacting Sunak supporters saying, come on board if you want a job in the next government. And the Mail says it is pretty well all over, bar the shouting. So what is to come and how will it all play out? Do keep your views coming in. We are at GBViews at gbnews.uk, or use my Twitter feed or GB News' own Twitter feed. feed. And I'm delighted to say, as promised, political correspondent from The Guardian, Aubrey Allegretti, is back with me live in the studio. And we're going to broaden the conversation out a little bit now by welcoming Sue Hannam, who is the head teacher of Lichfield Cathedral School, who is a good friend and a regular in our conversations, and I'm delighted to see her sitting there. Let me start with you, Sue, if I may, because we talked a lot about the, as it were, the economic cost of living dimension to this leadership contest. But so far, although both of them say, yeah, we'll have some more grammar schools going forward, not much else has gone on about education. Are you, as a head, disappointed at the level and reach of the debate so far?
To be honest, I think I am. I think it's interesting because Truss is suggesting that she's going to be the Education Prime Minister. We haven't heard much from her yet, other than replacing failing schools with grammar schools and a push on catch-up with regards to literacy and numeracy, which, again, I have to say, increased rigour offends a lot of teachers and schools that are doing a really mighty fine job in quite difficult circumstances.
Listening to that was Aubrey Allegretti, and I'm going to bring him in it, because she's absolutely spot on. And in one sense, a step back from that is grammars are just an obvious red rag to the Tories. They love it and bang that drum. They've both done that. But an awful lot of Tories that I talk to, whether it's well-established ones or people struggling at the cutting edge, are really concerned about what's going on in our schools at the moment, and hardly a word from either of them. Missed opportunity.
Yes, there are so many policy areas that have been maligned in the contest, and education certainly one of them, and yet should be so important. I mean, the idea of social mobility, we've barely heard those two words during the contest, but you'd think they'd be sort of inexorably linked with the policies of grammar schools that would be so attractive to Conservative members. But I suppose really the main thing they've focused on in terms of education is free speech, allowing teachers to sort of not be sort of kowtowed into looking away from parts of the curriculum or being forced to teach other bits of history. So it's something that they haven't really kind of put too much meat on the bones of. It's more kind of their vision. They want this to be their sort of brand of conservatism, pro-free speech extending into schools.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard very much other.
Sue, let me bring you back in on that point, because, again, I'm a student of these opinion polls that tell us what mums and dads and teachers are concerned about. And frankly, the issue of free speech and curriculum is way, way, way down the list, whereas the sheer quality of teaching in the classroom, staff levels, pay, avoidance of strikes come September, October, and getting decent results out there, that is what matters. Am I wrong, or can you tell me that from the coalface?
Our core business is to give every single pupil the best possible experience. And frankly, you can't do that if you haven't got a full staff body. I know a number of head colleagues who are struggling to recruit, and that's a real problem. Similarly, things like very, very significant mental health concerns with young people, where the resource is not there to address that, and you try and refer them to, places to get help. The help is not there. That's spilling over into schools all the time, and that really fundamentally needs addressing if we're going to free up the time for literacy and numeracy.
With you, Sue, moving on from that, however this Tory leadership issue is resolved, and whether it's Rishi or Liz, and we're looking at pictures of them at the most recent debate there, whichever one wins, come the general election, and it may be a snap decision, or it's more likely to be in May or October of 2024, education, and particularly the private sector, which you work in, is really going to be a general election issue, with Labour saying they will be gunning for tax relief, VAT and the rest of it for the private sector. If the Tories don't drill into that and come up with some answers, they are very, very vulnerable, as is your sector.
That's absolutely right. And it completely ignores the fact that there is a huge amount of cross-collaboration between the two sectors that does an awful lot of good in both directions. And it is worrying that there is silence on this. I think it is a missed opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? Because it's interesting what Sue was saying, and again, going back into prehistory, when Steve Byers was schools minister for Labour under Blair, he was trying to bolt together, for example, state schools in Manchester with Manchester Grammar School, saying, look, cross-fertilisation, work together. He wasn't one for taking VAT status away.
No, and I mean, it was previously Labour's policy platform and something that Keir Starmer probably previously would have signed up to, but he's been very reticent to kind of be held to the guarantees that were given in the 2019 election by Labour. For example, scrapping that relief for tax-free status for charities.
A nod to the Corbynistas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he'll probably have to sort of try and find this way of keeping both sides of his party on board, right? So by, on the one hand, appeasing those who want him to go quite far, go quite left, hark back to those policies of Jeremy Corbyn, but at the same time trying to pick up voters, those kind of middling voters who may even be Conservative members who joined in 2019 but have broken away from the party.
But don't you think that Starmer and his team, I think it's Bridget Phillipson, isn't it, on education within Labour, don't they realise that people like Sue and her colleagues in the private sector are educating hundreds of thousands of kids? It's not just the wealthy middle classes, it's middle-class people who scrimp and save to pay those fees. If you shut her sector down, the state system is going to have to pick up all of those kids. The taxpayer's going to have to pay for it all. I mean, it is almost economically illiterate, whatever the educational policy may be.
It is a difficult debate, and it's
not a difficult debate. It's a nonsense debate.
Well, partly Labour are so attracted to it because it's so popular.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the polling on measures, in particular policies in the 2019 general election manifesto for Labour, that was one of the more popular ones. So regardless of, like I say, the
polling within their own core base.
Well, no, amongst voters. So if you sort of blind poll voters without telling them which party the policies are for, then actually it's very interesting to see how many people do support that policy. Obviously, you can then have a debate about whether it's correct or not.
That's policy of envy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite difficult for them to not go down that route.
Sue, you can avoid this one if you want to, and I will respect whichever way you judge to go. But I'm talking to a number of people who I'd love to test the almost impossible with them. And here's an idea. What if parents who decide that they do want their children to be educated privately for whatever reason and are prepared to scrimp and save to do it, got tax relief as a reward for easing the burden on the state sector? Would that fly? Is that impractical? What impact would it have on your sector?
Gosh, that's rather a large question. I'm sure the parents would be utterly and completely delighted. But I suppose the fact is, at the moment, they are prepared to buy into the sector and still pay those taxes. And that's actually a benefit to everybody, including my colleagues who are working in a different sector. So I guess, and here I am pragmatically sitting on a fence, Alistair, really, that I wouldn't wish to encourage something that I think withdrew funding from education in any sense. And I've worked across both sectors actually for a number of years. And I think, they need every single penny they can get in those schools.
Yeah. Well, as anyone who watches this programme regularly knows, I have a daughter who has also worked in both sectors and says there are great state schools and there are great private schools and there are rotten ones on either side of the fence. But one of the things that strikes me, and it's interesting talking to her about it, is the degree to which demand for private education has held reasonably steady despite what's going on out there. Is that your experience in Lichfield as well?
Yes, it absolutely is. And in truth, I think, let alone politically what's been going on with the pandemic, we were very much wondering where this would go in terms of affordability across the sector and, of course, in Lichfield in the Midlands. And in fact, things have absolutely held firm. But you are absolutely right to say that there are, I have a number of parents of pupils in my school who are working incredibly hard, 2 and 3 jobs sometimes, and making sacrifices in order to make the choice to buy into that private education. And I think, there is a huge duty on all of us in education across both sectors to provide the best day for every child every day, because they're not getting that day back. Education comes at all sorts of costs.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring Aubrey back in, and then I've got one final big one for you, Sue, at the end. That, I think, is extraordinary. And if you were a policy advisor or a campaign advisor for either Liz or Rishi, pick that ball up and run with it, because people are not only scrimping and saving to pay those fees, but even in the cost of living crisis, They know what they want. It's not available in every state school, so they'll jolly well buy it in the private sector. That should be a clear priority, either for Truss or for Sunak.
Yeah, you can totally see it. I mean, I was partially a recipient of that because I went to private school on a bursary for a few years.
Yeah.
And so my mum was also sort of working all hours that God sent to send me to sort of top up the fee.
A bursary, I was going to say, a bursary being a little bit of help, but not the full whack. So
exactly.
your mum still had to work a what's-its off to pay the rest.
Exactly, yeah. And you come from a sort of slightly lower income household, so they help you, bring you in. And that's kind of part of the idea of social mobility. But I suppose...
There's something essentially Tory about that notion as well, though, isn't there?
Well, yes, and it's trying to sort of bring people in, recognise that private schools shouldn't just be the bastion of the privilege, but also try to bring people in who have that kind of level of achievement. I'm not necessarily talking about myself here, but who are worthy of sort of getting that opportunity. Yeah. And I think that's why Liz Truss's policy was so interesting of saying...
Well, the clash between her and Rishi about her state school and his Winchester College was one of the fascinating moments, although the history of that's been slightly rewritten several times. Aubrey, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. I promised Sue I had a final question for her, and it's this one. I think you will hop off the fence on this particular one, but post... the coronavirus and indeed as we come out, hopefully, of the cost of living crisis, many people, not least Robert Halfon, the chair of the Education Select Committee, have said that this is an ideal opportunity to have a really profound rethink about secondary education and the impacts that it has on all of us. Do you sense that as well in your sector? Because I know you don't only talk to people in the private sector, you talk across the range with folk. Is there an appetite there for what I would call a really quite profound rethink?
I think there probably is, actually. I am lucky enough to chair a group that's Futures Group, looking at future education with other head teachers. And one of the things that we've particularly looked at, actually, is how we look how we administer our public examinations and in what subjects and why. And I think this is the moment for me, particularly when you look at what was essentially a debacle during COVID over the exams. We are not, I think, the best example of how to do this. And if you look at other countries where they only have terminal exams in things like the core subjects, they examine other subjects in other ways, we could relieve a huge amount of burden on the system and do something that actually looks at skills in different ways, assesses them in different ways. I think it's an absolute golden opportunity to go, right, we've had this for years, it's time to do it differently.
Absolutely, 100% agree. We'll have to continue that conversation because what I'd then have moved on to, if we had more time, would be apprenticeships are sometimes more appropriate than glorious great degrees in this, that and the other. But that's another debate for another day. Sue, a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. Sue Hannam there, the head teacher of Lichfield Cathedral School. And Aubrey, thank you very much indeed for your contribution at the top of the programme and for staying with us to have take two on it as well. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And come and see us again soon, I hope. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's move to the authentic voice of local Conservatives, which we've read a bit of a thing about on this programme. We've done it several times now, and you seem to find it interesting. I certainly find it utterly intriguing. And so I'm delighted to be joined now by Councillor Colin Belsey, I do beg your pardon, Colin, who, there he is, chair of Eastbourne Conservative Association, and what's particularly key about him is that the latest hustings, of course, took place right there in Eastbourne last night. Colin, good of you to see us, to come on board, and good to see you there. What did you make of the hustings last night? According to the television reports and those that were there, it got a bit tasty on one or two occasions.
Well, I missed the exciting bit outside, Alistair. I'd gone in a bit early, I think, and but it got a bit freaky, I think, outside. One or two people who were coming in were a little bit frightened about the attitude of others that didn't like Rishi and Liz being there, shall we say.
Had it changed your mind? I mean, were you already in Camp Truss or Camp Sunak, or did it confirm it? Where are you coming from?
I'm still going to make my mind up. I mean, we've got 3 weeks to go, I think, before we can think about having to get the ballot paper in, and I think I guess we're all semi made our mind up, but I have to say that things do. Listening last night was good because it opens up new avenues that you hadn't thought about, and I'd like to think I'm going to do it correctly and not just do it on personalities and things like that. It's for the country. This is not for.
Interesting on my Twitter feed, Colin. I've had a lot of people saying, no, I knew exactly which road I was going to go down because there is a genuine ideological difference between Rishi and Liz, and I've already made my mind up. And I'm sitting there saying, no, please listen to the debate, please listen to the conversation, not with me, but with people like your good self.
Well, they said last night, the chairman took a rough vote, and only 25% admitted they'd already made their mind up.
Oh, that's good. That is good.
And there was
I'm going to pick up on. Let me, Colin, pick up on two things from what the team told me, because it's the first time that we've met and had a conversation. But my team told me that you used to be heavily involved with the Young Conservative group as well, and I found it intriguing that polling that was done of current Young Conservatives, they really wanted a Penny Mordaunt or a Kemi Badenoch figure in the final choice, and many youngsters nowadays feel that they're just left with, one of two retreads who've been there for the last goodness knows how long. Do you understand that feeling amongst the youngsters?
Yeah, I'm not a member of Young Conservatives anymore. I wish I was, but I was a Penny Mordaunt supporter, actually. And I was a bit disappointed when she didn't make the final two. But, I can understand that because I think both of Liz and Rishi, they're both very good. I mean, come on, you don't do the positions you've got in cabinet for a country like the UK without having your head screwed on right and making or putting forward the right things that you want cabinet to support you on. They're both good. And it's not an easy decision. But I originally would have gone with Penny, but I can't do that anymore.
Why can't? Oh, because the choice simply isn't there.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually like to see the rules change, perhaps, and that when we reach these things, perhaps there should be 4 candidates go before the members rather than just 2. I mean, all we're given is what the MPs have decided to give us.
Yeah. The other thing that Sir Graham Brady was asked to think about and rejected, because he, quite rightly, as the chair of the 22 committee, has to run it according to the rules as they are, is that an awful lot of people, and I wonder if there are some of them in Eastbourne, in your association, who wanted still, even now, to have the chance to do a write-in vote for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I've heard from some of them as chairman. Yeah, there is still support there for Boris. No two ways about it.
And does that simple fact, Colin, hurt Rishi?
That's a difficult one for me to answer, but he was closer than Liz was, I think, to Boris. And I think there's nothing between them really, and it'll come down to what you actually think the best person is, who you actually think the best person is to run our nation or be the head of our nation. It's a cabinet. It's like local government, Alistair. The leader of the council doesn't run the nation, the cabinet. It's a group decision. They're group decisions that are made. So,
well, we'll watch this with great interest. And when you have finally decided and are poised to sign that ballot paper with an X there or there, you give us a bell, Colin, and come back and talk to us again. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. For an accurate ex-Fleet Street man report on what happened last night and how the tectonic plates are shifting.
How did you know that?
I have a brilliant team who look after me. Colin, really lovely talking to you. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Councillor Colin Belsey there, chair of the Eastbourne Conservative Association, former Young Conservative and former Fleet Street hack. So there you see. Now, we have plenty more still to come in the final half hour and a little bit of Alastair Stewart and Friends after the break. With the rising energy prices around the United Kingdom, many are starting to question the future of the UK's energy sector. The government's recently approved the construction of a new nuclear power plant in Suffolk, which it hopes will help Britain diversify its energy sector and bolster our ability to be energy independent. We'll be discussing that next. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be dry across England and Wales with some rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Here are the details. The heaviest and most persistent rain this afternoon will be across the Northern Isles. The rest of Scotland will also see some rain, but it'll become increasingly patchy, allowing some brightness to develop. Brighter skies will also start to develop across Northern Ireland, particularly in the west. There'll still be some rain around, though, in the east. Although dry across northern England, there will be a fair bit of cloud around. The best of the sunshine will be towards Lancashire and Greater Manchester. Wales will also have a dry afternoon, with many areas seeing some good spells of sunshine. There'll be some fair weather cloud developing, but in the sunshine, temperatures will reach 20 Celsius. The sunniest skies will also be across the Midlands, with eastern parts especially seeing plenty of sun. Skies could become a little hazy at times, but temperatures will reach the low 20s. It'll also be feeling warm across East Anglia this afternoon, with plenty of sunshine. It'll be a little bit cooler nearer the coast, though, thanks to some sea breezes. Sunshine will also not be in short supply across the south of England as the dry spell continues. Temperatures will climb to around 23 or 24 Celsius away from the coast. Heading into the evening, and little changes with further rain across the far north of the United Kingdom, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things could have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
(31 I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. 12-year-old Archie Battersby, who's been in a coma since April, is due to have his life support withdrawn today. Archie's parents are said to be devastated after exhausting all legal avenues to extend his care, including the European Court of Human Rights. Doctors treating Archie declared that he was brainstem dead, but his family wanted treatment to continue in the hope that he would recover. Rishi Sunak has told GB News he believes political correctness is getting in the way of Britain tackling grooming gangs. In an exclusive interview, the former Chancellor pledged to create a new task force to tackle the issue and a new life sentence for those found guilty of the offence. Liz Truss has suggested that her leadership rival, Rishi Sunak's economic legacy as former Chancellor, is responsible for the expected recession. During a campaign visit to the West Midlands, the Foreign Secretary told reporters that having the highest taxes for 70 years does not encourage businesses to grow. Ms Truss says she'll look at what more can be done to help with rising fuel bills, including lowering green energy levies. GB News can reveal that over 1,460 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this week. 288 were taken to Dover on Friday after being pulled off of 5 inflatables. One migrant was found paddling on a kayak. GB News understands UK authorities are currently responding to several other small boat sightings in the Channel, including one off Dungeness. 9 rail companies are due to strike on August the 13th, including the London Overground, Avanti West Coast and LNER. The strike is expected to significantly impact fans journeying to Premier League games taking place across the country. The Rail Delivery Group is urging ASLEF's leadership to continue talks to avoid disrupting passengers' plans. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. The rising energy prices around the world have prompted many to start asking the questions about the future of the UK's energy supply and what they call in the trade energy security. Ours, for us alone. Now, the conflict in Ukraine, sanctions on Russia and an increasingly uncertain world means that energy self-sufficiency is very high on the list of government priorities. In this spirit, the government has recently approved the construction of a new nuclear power plant in Suffolk. They hope that it will help Britain diversify its energy sector and bolster our ability to be energy independent. Our East of England reporter Ed Crawford has more.
Britain's going nuclear. This giant dome building along Suffolk's coast is Sizewell B, which generates 3% of the UK's energy, enough to power 2.5 million homes in East Anglia. The government has approved the construction of Sizewell C and hopes that it will give the region as well as the UK's power grid a needed boost. Dwarfing Sizewell B, the new power plant will be almost double the size, and the government hopes it will help the country become more energy self-sufficient. Julia Pike, the financing director for Sizewell C, says she has big hopes.
Well, it's great news for Suffolk because we're working with all the local colleges. We're going to introduce lots and lots more skills training for young people and for adult retrainers. We're going to have 1,500 apprenticeships. We're going to bring thousands of really high quality jobs to Suffolk. And we're going to put around about 4 billion into the regional economy. So it's a fantastic boost.
Energy supplier EDF is behind the project and says it will generate enough low-carbon electricity to supply 6 million homes. It also believes it's a vital step in diversifying the UK's energy sector and reducing the country's dependence on fossil fuels. Ipswich MP Tom Hunt has followed the developments closely.
I support the construction of Sizewell C because locally I can see it providing a lot of jobs and opportunities for people, particularly young people, both during the construction phase and once it's completed. I also support Sizewell C because at the national level it's going to make a significant contribution towards a healthier energy mix for this country, one which promotes energy self-sufficiency and security.
The nuclear option isn't generating enthusiasm for everyone. Alison Downs from Stop Sizewell C has been campaigning for a rethink of the development and is sceptical of the claims it will make the UK self-sufficient.
Sizewell C is neither British nor is it secure. It's going to be developed by a foreign state-owned company that's currently in partnership with a Chinese state-owned company. Sizewell B behind us currently uses enriched uranium fuel from Russia, and that's going to be the case when it refuels next year. So there's a scramble here to find alternative sources of fuel for nuclear energy. And by the time Sizewell C is finally built, if it is built, our energy landscape is going to have been transformed. And I think that future politicians will come to regret investing billions of pounds in a project that is going to take so long to deliver any benefits.
With rising energy prices and a cold winter ahead, the government hopes that by taking the nuclear option now, Sizewell C will be heating Britain's homes and delivering energy security in the years to come. Ed Crawford, GB News.
A brilliant report, and I'm delighted to say that Ed joins me live now. Ed, thank you so much for that. Comprehensive report about the technology, energy security, the rows there with the woman who's anti at the end about where the fuel rods are coming from. But the bit I didn't know about, and I was talking to a headmistress just a moment ago on the programme, is that apprenticeship and training element. So it's not only British power for British people, it's also educational opportunities.
It is, Alistair. There will be up to 1,500 apprenticeships going at Sizewell C. Now, Sizewell C is an incredibly ambitious project. It's going to take between 10 and 12 years. So there will be apprenticeships and jobs for the local region throughout that time. In fact, it's such a big project that all the labour needed will need its own campus. So the opportunities for apprenticeships and development in the local community are there, and they're very encouraging from an external point of view. That's why MP Tom Hunt, partly why he's very in favour of the construction of Sizewell C.
A member of the Education Select Committee, so knows all about education and training. Ed, again, thank you. Brilliant report. Enjoyed every moment of it, and thanks for finding time to join us live this afternoon as well. Thank you very much indeed. Ed Crawford there, our East of England correspondent. Now, you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including the war in Ukraine continuing to rage and the Ministry of Defence saying that Russia's war in Ukraine is to enter a new phase. We'll have more on that live from Ukraine right after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. We make a point on this programme of trying to bring you our regular updates on Ukraine, because it really does matter. Kira Rudik, MP, is the leader of the Golosh Party, and shortly after the invasion of Ukraine was with Parliament during the night where they declared martial law and indeed joined the armed resistance. In March, said that was living with 30 soldiers and trained each day practising how to use a rifle. And I am delighted to welcome her back to the programme. It's an honour to see you as always, and thank you for finding time. I was talking to Robert Fox, a very good friend of mine and one of our top defence correspondents, and he was saying Russia is in trouble, Ukraine is in the ascendant in the conflict now, and that may mean a truce is back on the cards. What is your view of that?
Hi, Alistair. Thank you so much for having me. So, first of all, yes, indeed, because of the support that we are getting from our allies, including the United Kingdom, we are pushing Russians back. However, we do not need to forget that they are having basically the second largest army in the world. So they are right now gathering forces to push us back on the south of Ukraine. What is very worrying right now is that tonight they attacked one of the largest nuclear stations in Europe, Zaporizhia electro station. And as you have discussed with your previous guests, it is critical that the nuclear power comes with the ability to get the security in. Right now, we are even unable to fight them back because we are so concerned about another tragedy that may happen if the fighting at the nuclear station will continue.
Yeah.
Because we remember Chernobyl, we know that radiation doesn't account of which passport you are holding, and the tragedy may be absolutely massive. That could also be one of the Putin's plans to create an incident at the station and then say that it was his attack as using nuclear powers. But the way that we are going to push it forward is we will make sure by all means that the security of the nuclear station is provided.
I was going to ask you about that, but I don't have to now because you explained it so perfectly. And I think you will correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about the Zaporizhia nuclear power station, where the Russians are using it as cover to fire on your people. The other thing, Kira, if I may put to you, that Robert also said, is that there may now be a mood amongst the leadership of Ukraine, your good self included, President Zelensky also included, to say, look, that progress that you have just so eloquently described is such that we are now prepared to consider talking about a ceasefire. If that is the case, who would the honest broker be?
So, first of all the discussions about ceasefire, all the discussion about potential peace need to include two things. First, Ukraine to regain all the territories that we have lost. Second, we need a security guarantees, and that should be external security guarantees. As of right now, I have not seen any single world leader or any single country that would say, we will guarantee that Putin will not attack again. We will vouch for him that he will keep his word. You see, even with the grains deal, and I will remind that we have right now a so-called peaceful deal to get the grains out of Ukrainian ports, secured by United Nations and by Turkey. And so far, the grain is going out. And it seems like a trial for a potential peace that can or cannot be made with Russia. But even with this deal, they attacked Ukrainian ports a day after the deal was signed. And second, I still did not hear anything from United Nations or from Turkey. What would happen if Russia will attack us? Not even with the rockets, but with the warships. Are they going to get into the war? Are they going to get into the fighting and protect Ukraine? Because if not, it is not a security guarantees. And if yes, then the NATO countries, then Turkey as NATO country is basically vouching to get into the war. So without this security dialogue being constructed, there is no peace deals being talked about. And last but not the least, incredibly important, that we are only as good right now as the amount of weapons that you guys are providing to us. And the progress that we are seeing right now is not only because Ukrainian army is pushing and fighting, because we push and fight since the day one. But right now we finally have something in our hands to fight with. Real weapons, HIMARSs, different rocket systems that we are actually able to push Russians back. So to be able to construct any discussion or deal, we need to ensure that the supply of the weapons will continue and is guaranteed for us. And Russia also is waiting for this, because they hope that the supply of the weapon will wind down. And that's why this complicated construction needs to come from all the sides.
Kira, in the past, you've always been clear about your personal gratitude, but also that of the political class in Ukraine for what the UK government has been able to do, and to be blunt, slightly earlier than some others who've come along to support the good people of Ukraine with military support. How concerned are you at the departure of Boris Johnson, and how confident are you that our next Prime Minister is either going to be the current Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, or the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak? How do you view that as an experienced Ukrainian political leader?
So, indeed, the support from the United Kingdom came the earliest, and we are incredibly grateful for that. And there are many politicians in Ukraine that are really concerned because of the change of the leadership in the United Kingdom. However, I want to believe that the support that is coming is not coming from Boris Johnson personally, it's coming from the United Kingdom people. And second, we have carefully read and went through all the statements that both candidates to Prime Minister role have made. And they all ensured, both of them actually ensured, that they will continue on the support of Ukraine. I know that they will both be concentrated, first of all, on the dealing with the economical crisis that all the countries are facing right now. But I see my own job and the job of all Ukrainian politicians to build the new connections, to build the new trust, and to make the agreement that Ukraine will continue receiving the support at the terms and even bigger that we have received before. There is another point, is that you guys will need more and more money for this. And this is one of the directions that I'm working on, is to unfreeze Russian assets that right now are in the United Kingdom and use them to cover for the help that Ukraine is getting. And we don't actually care, are this money going to be used for the weapons programs, or for the training programs, or for the refugee programs, or sent directly to Ukraine, but it will help to ease the burden that is coming on every UK taxpayer right now. And I understand that it will get harder and harder.
All right. Kira, as I said at the very beginning, it is genuinely always a pleasure and an honour to talk to you. And do keep in touch. And thank you very much indeed for your time this Saturday afternoon. Kira Rudik, leader of the Golosh Party, member of the Ukrainian Parliament, with a beautiful final thought, and that is take what is Russian money frozen as an asset in London and pay the manufacturers to supply the weapons that the Ukrainians can use against the Russians. I love it. I hope someone in authority was listening to that. Always great to hear from her. We will, of course, be getting a new Prime Minister, as Kira and I were just discussing, in the next 4 weeks, and it is now down to the final two candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. The clashes between who's been the better possessor of economic policy to get us out of the cost of living crisis continue, and it was no different at last night's hustings in Eastbourne. There's more to come over the summer break. We spoke earlier to a Rishi backer, so the final word goes to my next guest, Sir Christopher Chope, who is backing Liz Truss. Christopher, good of you to join us on the programme again. Help me on this one. I'm going to cut to the chase because we've got about 6 minutes. I am still slightly confused why so many of the old school within the party, like you, are going with Liz Truss on her economic policy, which is not Thatcherite and is not Lawson-esque. What persuaded you?
Well, I think the argument is put very well in an article in the Telegraph today by John Redwood. And he was in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet, in the sense that he was there in Downing Street as her political advisor. And he says that Liz Truss is very much in tune with Thatcherite thinking on the economy. So these people who are trying to suggest otherwise have got vested interest, but I don't think that their assessment is accurate. And John Redwood is probably the best expert on this, and he's very much saying what Liz is suggesting is absolutely spot on, and that's what Margaret Thatcher would have done in similar circumstances.
Intriguing. I did read it, and I know John a bit, and I'm an admirer of him, and he's been consistent, to be fair to him, on that approach. But I'm also old enough to remember that when Nigel Lawson did what Nigel Lawson did, and Geoffrey Howe before him, and Nigel has come out in support of Rishi. Peter Lilly, who took a very strong line on welfare payments and the size of the state, has come out for Rishi. You and John are slight outliers in this, Christopher.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but the issue is, are we correct? Is Liz right, or are the others right? And Rishi, extraordinarily, in his literature, and I've yet to actually put my vote in the post, but I was reading what he was saying, and he was saying that if Liz Truss became the Prime Minister, then, and I quote, we would have the alternative, an economy with inflation spiralling out of control. Well, inflation is spiralling out of control, and it's because it happened on Rishi's watch. And for him to, and his supporters, suggest that the plans to increase corporation tax next year, which Liz is going to not pursue, the plans to abandon our manifesto commitments and increase national insurance, which Liz is going to reverse if she's elected, those things will actually help reduce the burden on ordinary hard-working families, as indeed will some of the other measures that Liz is dealing with. So we don't want to increase taxes at this time. We want to reduce taxes and thereby help reduce the pressures of inflation.
Christopher, we're going to have to end there, but I'm going to ask you to jot down in your diary, because I want to continue the conversation. You will understand in the next 30 seconds why I'm ending our conversation at that stage. But thank you for your time, and do please come back to continue the conversation either tomorrow or next weekend. So, Christopher Chope, thank you very much indeed. And I explained that to my good friend Christopher Chope for one very obvious reason, which I suspect you've been expecting, and that is that the family of 12-year-old Archie Battersby have told us and everybody else that their beloved son has died following the withdrawal of life support. It follows a long-running legal battle fought by that loving family, including bids to the High Court, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, the United Nations and the European Court of Human Rights. No family could have fought harder and tougher than that family has. Archie, meantime, had been kept alive at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel using a combination of medical interventions since April after an incident at his home. Well, yesterday morning, the High Court ruled that it was not in Archie's best interest to be moved to a hospice, and the Court of Appeal rejected permission to appeal that decision. So Archie has now died, and his family will be dealing with that as best they can. GB News will keep you up to date on that and bring you more as it develops, and more reaction to it as well. So stay tuned, GB News. But from me, on a very sombre note, a good afternoon to you.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be dry across England and Wales, with some rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Here are the details. The heaviest and most persistent rain this afternoon will be across the Northern Isles. The rest of Scotland will also see some rain, but it'll become increasingly patchy, allowing some brightness to develop. Brighter skies will also start to develop across Northern Ireland, particularly in the west. There'll still be some rain around, though, in the east. Although dry across northern England, there will be a fair bit of cloud around. The best of the sunshine will be towards Lancashire and Greater Manchester. Wales will also have a dry afternoon, with many areas seeing some good spells of sunshine. There'll be some fair weather cloud developing, but in the sunshine, temperatures will reach 20 Celsius. The sunnier skies will also be across the Midlands, with eastern parts especially seeing plenty of sun. Skies could become a little hazy at times, but temperatures will reach the low 20s. It'll also be feeling warm across East Anglia this afternoon, with plenty of sunshine. It'll be a little bit cooler nearer the coast, though, thanks to some sea breezes. Sunshine will also not be in short supply across the south of England as the dry spell continues. Temperatures will climb to around 23 or 24 Celsius away from the coast. Heading into the evening, and little changes, with further rain across the far north of the United Kingdom, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning,